Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. Welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. I am once again at the Autodesk Technology Center in Boston, and I am joined by Jim Lynch, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Autodesk Construction, and Amy Bunszel, the Executive Vice President of Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. And today we're here to talk all about legacies, and we have a lot of really cool stuff in store for you today. But I'm excited to talk about this topic because I think it's so important to consider. And in your role, I think legacy can tie to the people that you work with and the relationships you build. It ties back to the industries that you influence. There's so much more, but I'm not going to steal what my guest today might actually share. How you both doing today? You feeling good here in the Tech Center? I'm so happy we're able to bring both together.
Feeling great. Happy to be here, Eric.
Same here.
Jim, you've had a lot of history with the Technology Center here in Boston, and I heard that there was an interesting story about the ribbon cutting and the former Boston mayor. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Around 2015 timeframe, at the time, Autodesk had an office up in Manchester, New Hampshire, about an hour north. We also had an office in Waltham, which is on the fringe of Boston, if you will. The problem with Waltham, and by the way, we ended up in Waltham as a result of the Revit acquisition. The problem with Waltham is you couldn't hire. It was hard to hire kids out of college, which is crazy because we have the best universities, arguably, in the world here.
Yeah, but MIT is like a stone's throw away. Right?
Exactly, but there was very little public transportation. So it was hard to get kids to want to come to work. So we decided to move from Waltham to Boston to the Seaport area, really with the idea of being closer for students to come here and be able to travel, use public transportation, and to be closer to the technology scene here. So when we chose this location, which is the Innovation and Design Building here in the Seaport, we wanted to achieve a couple of things. Certainly, we wanted office space for our teams, R&D, marketing, sales, et cetera. But we also wanted to create what we called AEC, Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Build Space. We wanted to create an environment and a workshop and a series of workshops where folks from academia and from industry could come in and explore and experiment with next generation fabrication and construction techniques. So that's how we chose this location. In 2016, we did the ribbon cutting. At the time, the mayor of Boston was Mayor Marty Walsh, who has a long legacy, speaking of legacy, in the construction industry. He was head of the union for a while, and he's just very well known in the construction sector here in Boston and New England. So we asked Mayor Walsh to come and participate in the ribbon cutting, which he did. And it was phenomenal because the way we cut the ribbon was not the traditional pair of scissors. Instead, we had a chop saw hanging from a chain, and we gave Mayor Walsh a button control where he lowered the saw, and then another button caused the saw to cut. And that's how we cut the ribbon for, at the time, what was called the Autodesk Build Space. Today, of course, it's the Autodesk Technology Center. But it was an amazing day. It was a really fun day. Mayor Walsh was, a good sport in humoring us to do this a different way. But we had a lot of laughs. We had to practice it because, the worst thing that could happen during a ribbon cutting when you're doing something like that is somebody loses, an appendage. So yeah, we practiced a few times, so that didn't happen.
We got to be OSHA compliant.
Absolutely.
I love that, though. And it's what a big way to open up the space, and just a very cool story to kind of tee off our conversation on legacies for sure. But Jim, also, I heard you're retiring, and this has come up a couple of times. And I just want to say, first off, I'm very grateful for all the support you've had of Digital Builder, and I'm excited to get into legacy because you've been with Autodesk for a very long time. But, what's next for retiring? Are you headed to the retirement home, or what's going to happen?
It's been a great 28 years at Autodesk, and we'll talk about that. I mean, an amazing 28 years with the people and the career opportunities and the impact we've had on the world around us. I've had a chance to play a role in that. But the word retirement just feels old to me. So, I try to just say, yeah, I'm leaving Autodesk after 28 years, or I'm retiring from Autodesk after 28 years. And I'm not, Eric, I think you know me better than that. I'm not going home to catch up on episodes of, old TV shows. I've always believed a body in motion stays in motion. So that's what I intend to do.
I appreciate that, Jim. And I know that, which is why I poke fun at you a little bit here. But Amy, I want to dig in a little bit more on legacy. And then Jim, I want your take on this question in a second as well. What do you think about when the word legacy comes out? I mean, you both have had a big influence on both Autodesk and the industries that the company supports. Can you tell me a little bit about how you think about that?
Well, the easiest way I think about it is kind of leaving something better than you found it. So, I think as we've been through our careers, we've built teams, inherited teams, learned about different industries. And I think anyone has the opportunity to move something forward and leave things better than they found them.
I really like that. And it really just comes down to the relationships you build and the people that you work with. I mean, what else do we have? I mean, we spend so much time at work and supporting the industries that we serve through, whether it's construction, architecture, or many, many others here at Autodesk. Jim, what else comes to mind for you on the side of legacy? I mean, you've been here for, as you said a minute ago, 28 years, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. I love Amy's definition, by the way. I think it's a really interesting way to look at the concept of legacy. For me, I would just add to that, I think it's the impact that you have, what you are remembered by, whether it's in your professional career or your private life, with your loved ones, your friends, your family. But it's about, what impact, what you'll be remembered by. And yeah.
I love that perspective. And it means so much when you have that opportunity to leave something behind in that regard, whether it was, in the work that you've done or the relationships you've built. So thank you for kind of giving me a click into what you think about, because you both have a lot of responsibility. A lot of people have reported to you over the years, and it's just a very cool thing to think about in that context. But Jim, I want to click down a little bit into your own personal legacy then. Tell me some of the highlights over the 28 years that you've been at Autodesk. Like, what's that trajectory look like, and what are you most proud of?
Yeah. There's a lot to
no pressure,
think about over 28 years. Certainly I joined the company on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon, and worked on version 1 of Inventor. In fact, when I joined the company, we didn't even know the name of what we were building. It was codenamed Rubicon, and then we launched Inventor. Being part of that was really fun. I think, some of the other highlights that I would call out is being part of the team that acquired Revit and, really helped integrate Revit into the company. I led the Revit organization for a number of years. I'm really proud of the work and honored to be a part of the team that really drove the concept of BIM. I remember over the years, there were many competitors who claimed that they created the term BIM. I was in the room because we were brainstorming. We were like, hey, we need to put a label on Revit. We need to somehow brand what Revit is about. And we were brainstorming, and there were some crazy names coming out. And somebody in the room, it wasn't me, said, what about building information modeling? And we're like, yeah, that's it.
Boom.
So I'm really proud to be a part of the team, not that just named that, but more importantly, drove the concept of BIM. And it's really it's a household name in design and construction.
It's core to the way that we do work today, and for very good reason.
Exactly. So I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of many of the acquisitions I've done. Certainly the acquisition of Navisworks was a game changer. The acquisition of Vela, which later became BIM 360, I think was a game changer as well, and really kind of laid the foundation for what we later did in Autodesk Construction Solutions. And then, of course, the last thing I would call out is building, creating Autodesk Construction Solutions and leading just an amazing organization with incredibly, incredibly passionate people.
Well, especially that last one, I have to be very grateful for, because I've been a big part of that since, PlanGrid became part of Autodesk, and I'm very grateful for that. Amy, you also spent a number of years here at Autodesk, of course, almost as long as Jim. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of your own personal, highlights and part of your own legacy here at Autodesk.
For sure. So I joined the company through an acquisition, just like you did, Eric, a little while ago. So in 2003, I was actually living here in Boston. I had built a wire harness design software that was actually integrated with some of Autodesk competitors' products. And Autodesk, actually, Andrew Anagnost, our CEO, drove this acquisition when he was a director of marketing or something. And then I moved from Boston to Portland. It's almost as if Jim and I sort of crisscrossed the United States. I think back about legacy. One of the things that I'm so proud of is that functionality. We integrated it into Inventor, and it's still shipping and being used by our customers 22 years later. And so that makes me extremely proud. And then I started my journey about 12, 13 years ago into AEC. So I came to San Francisco to run the AutoCAD team in 2010. Super proud of getting, AutoCAD back on the Mac, AutoCAD on iOS and Android, AutoCAD on the web. So we now have an extremely modern AutoCAD portfolio for our customers. And then back to the acquisition theme. In 2020, 2021, I led the acquisition of both Spacemaker, which was a foundational component for our Forma Industry Cloud, and then Innovize. So getting Autodesk much more significant footprint in the water space.
Yeah, the infrastructure push has been huge in the last few years, and both those tools and platforms are pretty incredible. So it's cool that you were able to bring so much together. And as me sitting here, as part of Autodesk Construction today, very grateful for the groundwork that both of you have laid to, move forward this very large impact on an industry that impacts every person in the world, whether they think about it or not. And so it's just very cool to hear that journey and in the influence you've both had. Jim, can you share more about the arc of construction at Autodesk? And of course, my journey in this started with that PlanGrid acquisition we mentioned earlier, which again, I have to thank you for very much because I very much enjoy working at Autodesk and I'm grateful for all the hard work that everybody is doing. But I want to hear a little bit more about that story about where Autodesk Construction Cloud started and how did that evolution go up until today?
Early on, the company, in the early 2000s, the company did a couple of acquisitions. But I really think it was, when we first acquired Navisworks that got us in that coordination, clash detection play around pre-construction. And then the Vela acquisition, which ultimately became BIM 360, those things got us started. But I think we really picked up momentum when Andrew made the decision to create a separate business unit called Autodesk Construction Solutions to really focus on the needs of the market. Of course, AutoCAD has served the construction segment from the early days. I mean, from the first days of AutoCAD right through Revit. It's hard today to find a contractor or a subcontractor that doesn't have a copy of Revit or doesn't have a copy of AutoCAD. But Andrew saw an opportunity for Autodesk to really help our customers drive more predictability across the entire life cycle, not just pre-construction, but out on the job site as well, around project management, around cost management, around change management. And so, he felt the way to do that was to create a separate business unit in the company, invest heavily in that, and have the rest of the company support that. And I think it was really an innovative approach. And the reason why he did that is because out of the gate, he wanted us to move quickly. And when he asked me to lead Autodesk Construction Solutions, which, I'm still grateful today for him asking me to lead this amazing opportunity. We talked about, listen, at some point, we're going to want to fold this back in to the rest of the company to really accelerate momentum to that next level. And so we created Autodesk Construction Solutions. As you know, we did 6 acquisitions in a 5-year period, and we did invest heavily in that business, and we continue to do that today. But that's really that's the arc of construction. And to be sure, and I know we're going to talk about it, we are not done. Autodesk is far from done in terms of investing and driving profitability and predictability for our customers in construction, not to mention safety and sustainability. But I know we'll talk about that.
And that's a big part of why I'm sitting in front of you. I mean, outside of the fact that PlanGrid got acquired, is just that big vision and look forward for how we can continue to serve such a critical and important industry.
Definitely.
I say this all the time, but construction touches every single person in the world in some degree, whether they think about that or not. And I can look back to when I joined the industry fresh out of college, and I was still working as a proposal writer who didn't know anything about the construction industry at all. And even in that moment, it was painful to look and see that there were no tools that were made for me. Nothing existed at that point to work with the field teams to gather information, to sell big betterments on how we're actually delivering our projects and manage and moving all that data and information around. As you all well know, before PlanGrid started digitizing everything, you had your big rolls of documentation and a lot of very disparate communication in a way that introduces rework. It introduces delays and scope creep and all kinds of other things that I think we are well on our way to navigating and managing in a way that just wasn't possible 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that vision and also just the creation of such that separate segmented business unit made a bunch of sense, especially for me coming from a startup where, we were very nimble and lean and admittedly, I'll be honest, a little bit anxious at the initial onset of the acquisition because we didn't know what was coming. And looking back, I'm glad that somebody else didn't acquire us. I'm very thankful that it was Autodesk because the vision and what's happening today is so impactful and so important. And so that actually tees up my next question nicely. Amy, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that vision and, what's next. Jim just alluded to the fact that we are most certainly not done. What are you thinking about every day and what keeps you up at night?
Well, the past 14 months, so construction came over the development team to my team February 1st last year. And so, initially it was very much about don't disrupt the momentum, make sure we can learn about what they're doing, and then figure out ways by having both the design and the construction teams together to accelerate and to do a better job helping customers in some of the gaps and the seams and workflows. And so I would say one area that we continue to invest a lot in is data. And we talk a lot about Autodesk Docs now being that backbone for, and a big part of our platform, everything from, early phase conceptual design to construction and to operations. So by putting the teams together, we're now able to tell a bigger story and connected the dots across the line. And data is really, so many of the problems you just mentioned about out-of-date documents or PDFs or paper. By us being able to connect data across the value chain, my hope is much less of it gets remodeled and rebuilt and the industry can, drive towards the profitability that it deserves over time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're able to eliminate so much manual work and also a lot of the ambiguity and uncertainty tied to managing projects from the very beginning of conception all the way to handing over to the teams that are actually owning and living and working and using the facilities. And I can just think about digging around in folders and file servers and finding, document _final _final V1 _final this is really final. And it was so painful and such a not advanced way of managing information. And the amount of data that construction companies are generating these days is considerable, to put it lightly. And I think folks are now in a position where they're building out data strategies. They're being intentional. They have teams of data scientists on their staff now to help manage this. So they have better insights, more predictability, a lot more focus. I couldn't imagine 15 years ago a construction company saying, yeah, we have 10 data scientists on staff. I think when we spoke with John Fish a couple of years ago, Suffolk at that point had like 30 or 32 data scientists on staff, right. Which is incredible. It's such an interesting and thoughtful development and nuance of the way that the industry works today.
Yeah, I think in my recent experience, our construction customers they've been managing mountains of data for years and years. And now we're able to enrich that with even more of the design data. So they're going to be able to take a lot of the insights really to the next level and prevent problems, right? By knowing if you do these three things, or you don't do certain types of checks, or you don't follow this process, we can tell you that you're going to have problems on this job. So how do we bring that all the way up into design and just start preventing the inevitable mistakes that are happening these days?
Yeah, there's an opportunity for a feedback loop that has historically not existed as far as engaging and interacting with the design teams a little bit later in the process and being able to bring that information to the next project and the next project instead of having everything live in its own little silo. Now you're able to go and you go, okay, what subcontractors do we work with and where are those challenges arising historically? How do we develop this in a way that builds our relationships and improves that certainty? And, the owners see this too because they have more insights, they have more data, they're getting their projects on time, on or under budget, especially if you're thinking about, things like integrated project delivery. And so we're on a really wonderful trajectory. And that actually kind of tees up one more question I got for you. tell me more about the platform aspect of this conversation. I think that word gets thrown around a lot in a way that can be confusing for folks. And I think the concept, as far as how Autodesk thinks about it, is very instrumental in everything that you're talking about, and might give a little bit more clarity to those out there listening as far as what that big vision looks like for the future.
It's been quite the journey. And, for a company like Autodesk, who started out with these very disparate, desktop products, we had some common components we shared across those products. But now that we're in the cloud, our ability to go faster by having a set of common industry-specific capabilities that we can deploy across the whole portfolio helps our teams go faster, right? And to solve customer problems faster. And it also gives us a great opportunity for third parties to build, on top of our APIs, on top of our both the application and the data APIs, to further accelerate the digitization in the industry.
I love that, because we don't get to go at this alone. Like, this is not a one company situation. And I think to serve the needs of all of the businesses, we're working with, drone companies, laser scanning. There's so many advanced and interesting aspects of technology today that didn't exist previously. Contractors are required now to figure out what platform that they're going to align on, because it's so critical to how you navigate and manage the data that comes from all of these different tools. Like, we're not a drone company, but we can work with the drone company to manage and navigate the data that comes into the tool. And so there's a lot to be strategic and intentional about. And I think folks really need to be thoughtful as they start adopting technology to figure out, what does a platform mean for you? And how are you going to centralize all of this information in a way where you're not manually working with all the different tools that your technology stack uses? And so there's a lot of work that goes into being thoughtful up front. I've talked about this many, many times, but like, if you're early in your data journey in the construction industry, it can feel quite overwhelming, because there's may not be data standards. There might not be any real strategy behind how we're capturing data and why we're capturing data. And so I always tell people, be really smart and intentional. Where is the easiest place to manage and improve the way you capture your data? Be really intentional about improving that. And you build out your proof case, and then you expand it to the other parts of the business, because you have champions internally now where your safety team is like, heck yeah, we have so much data we didn't have previously. Now we can really lean on this and bring out these standards and these improvements to the rest of the business. And so it's not a boil the ocean conversation, but I think there's a lot of work for folks to do who are early, but it's rewarding work, because it's going to have a big impact on something that you can control in a business where there are so many things that you cannot.
And it's quantifiable. You can look at, mistakes that you avoided that meant, you didn't have to go get out the jackhammer and dig up the sidewalk or any of these things. And so I think people feel a lot of satisfaction that way. And it's also great for the company.
I want to click in a little bit more about what's next. So we've talked about this a lot and alluded to it so far. And Jim, I'd like to hear, you don't like the retirement word, so we're going to throw that one out. Like, you're departing Autodesk in the not too distant future, but what do you have in mind? Where are we going to see your name cross under inboxes in the future?
I think a couple of things. I'm not going to leave the industry completely.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. There are a number of things that I want to pursue. I love the game of hockey. I play once or twice a week. I want to continue, if not increase, the number of times I get out on the ice. I enjoy it that much. I play guitar. I want to continue to learn new guitar skills. I want to learn the mandolin. I want to learn how to record. So maybe you can teach me that.
Give me a call.
I want to travel. I want to get to Africa. I've never been to Africa. Despite all the traveling I've done around the world, haven't been to Africa. My mother loved elephants. I always wanted to take her to an elephant sanctuary. Unfortunately, we lost her years ago, never was able to do that. But I want to go and spend some time at an elephant sanctuary. I want to volunteer some time, but I also want to stay engaged with the industry. So what I plan to do, I'm going to be on some boards. I'm working with talking to a number of private equity firms today, but I want to be on some boards tied specifically to construction technology. I'm also going to do some advisor work for some private equity firms, and I'm going to do some consulting for some of our customers. I've already, had some discussions along that path. Amy has also asked me to do some consulting work and contracting work with Autodesk, which I'm thrilled about, because I love the company. I've said it.
We couldn't let you go that easily.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
That was not happening.
Yeah, we're all glad for that.
well, I appreciate it. So my goal is to cut down on the amount of time I spend working and increase the time in other areas, time with friends, time with family. That's what the future holds for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're not going away, Jim. I've told you this in jest, a little bit in jest earlier today before we started recording. Like, I'm a little mad at you right now that you're headed out the door, because I've been so grateful for your support over the years, and it's been a real pleasure just seeing your vision for this industry and how deeply you care about it. And so I'm glad to hear that you're going to still be hanging around Autodesk doors on occasion, and I'm looking forward to seeing what companies you start serving and where your name pops up in my LinkedIn feed in the not too distant future. Amy, I'd also love to hear your thoughts on what's next. So I think we've alluded to the vision, but give me a little bit more detail. Like, what's in store for you?
Well, we certainly have to finish what we started. So ACC has been on a just incredible high momentum journey. And so there's some of the acquisitions that we've done that we still need to integrate. So Building Connected, Assemble, ProEst, there's a few others. And that will start to give our customers on the platform an even more integrated experience with all this other value that we have. Last year we acquired PayApps. That's proving to be very interesting in the UK, Ireland, the US, and Australia. So we've got more to do there in terms of integration. And then we have to keep looking for ways, other gaps, cost and schedule, I hear every day from all the customers, and, of that being important. And then the construction team's always called it connected construction. And so we've connected a lot of construction across the way. And now we need to deepen those connections with design, right? So we can dive more into pre-construction, eliminating mistakes and errors there so that everything just flows really smoothly.
I'm glad to hear that too, because, you hear connected construction thrown around like a bit of a buzzword, but there's a lot of meaning behind that if teams are doing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much sense for us to be deepening the integrations in the way that all the tools that have become part of the Autodesk portfolio work together, because we're eliminating even more opportunities for manual transfer of data and making sure that everything we talked about earlier, when we're moving that information from design all the way through the entire ecosystem to the operations phase, is even more seamless than it is today. And I think that's where we have the opportunities.
Well, the other great thing about that is, you're going to have high trust collaboration situations and low trust collaboration situations. But if you've got all of your sort of users on the platform, then you can control, who has access to what and when and how, and you have the ability to really understand what's been happening with your data as well.
I love that. So I've got two more questions for both of you today. And the first one I'm going to ask, I can't help because I am a construction technology nerd, if you probably haven't figured out yet. And so I'm really interested to look to the future here. What type of construction tech for both of you are you really excited about? Either something that exists right now and you're just really fired up and you think it's neat, or something maybe in that hypothetical world where we're kind of inching closer to it, but you feel is going to have an outsized impact on the industry if things kind of, close that loop. Jim, I'd love to hear your thoughts here first. What gets you fired up?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things actually do. I can jump to robotics, but I think the thing, as I talk to our customers around the globe, and as I talk to private equity firms and where they're putting their dollars, and if I look at the tech landscape, I was in it before, and I'll be in it post Autodesk. It really is. Data and AI are just going to have such an amazing impact. And data is, there's just a huge definition around data, where it comes from. Does it come from the design tools? Does it come from the pre-con tools? Yes, the answer is yes. It also comes from drones. It also comes from video. It also comes from augmented reality. So there is just so much data, and AI will play a huge role in doing the things that Amy talked about, right? About predicting issues before they take place, about driving more automation. So that's the thing that gets me the most excited. But I could go on, because there are a lot of really interesting technologies that Autodesk is building, but also the startup community is building as well.
Yeah, the ecosystem is crazy right now.
It's unreal.
It's almost overwhelming. I feel for folks in a decision-making capacity who are trying to choose what tools to use across the entire ecosystem of building and operating their facilities, because as I talked about before, there used to be almost nothing. And now today we're in this position where there's new stuff everywhere because, the opportunity is here and folks are really understanding that ROI in the construction industry really does deliver if it's executed well. But also at the same time, don't be too excited about the shiny new toys before you really think about how they prove and bring value to the business, because a lot of work comes with bringing in, whatever new drone or whatever new tool you might be
100%.
rolling in. So Amy, what about your side of things? What gets you excited right now in the world of construction tech?
Well, so yesterday I had the opportunity to hang out with some of our construction customers, and Amar from Windover Construction came to visit my team and share some of his experiences with the people that
I love
are building the software. I know he's been a guest on
he's
here
great.
before. Autodesk has made a few bets on what we think is going to be important for the future, and he's like leaning into all of them. So he told us some amazing stories about industrialized construction and offsite manufacturing and, bringing together pods from Canada to build some of these buildings. He's invested heavily in reality capture so that when he hands over a project, you can see kind of what's behind the walls and what's under the concrete. I mean, they're just doing amazing things. And then digital twins. They're building digital twins here in Massachusetts for some of their projects. And they've been an amazing partner to us in giving us feedback to advance these tools. So I'm excited about, the present, and that some of our customers are really leaning into these advanced technologies today. And then it's only going to get better, as what Jim said. But it is hard to separate the noise from the signal in some cases, which is great. I mean, I came from a startup, and you want to have 1,000 flowers, and then you want to, over time, figure out which ones are really going to have an impact.
It makes a bunch of sense in that regard as far as figuring out where you really want to lean in. But like a lot of development has been happening in the last 10 or 15 years, and people are excited, and for good reason. And I'm so glad you brought up Amar, because the work that his team is doing and his willingness to share his perspective as well has been incredible. But Windover's doing some really great stuff. So I love both your answers on that one too. And obviously you're preaching to the choir here as far as construction tech nerd goes. So final question, Jim, I've asked you this one a number of times, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Today, what's one tool that you would bring to every project that you work on?
Well, I knew you were going to ask this question.
I would hope so.
You ask it at the end of every episode, which, by the way, it's a really good question. It's a thoughtful question. But I'm going to go off script here, and I'm going to say three things, and I'll tell you why. Last week, I had the honor, of joining CEO staff for quote unquote the last time. We had a really nice dinner where they, roasted
you a little
roasted
bit.
me,
Yes.
honored me.
You shared 10-year-old pictures and more.
Yeah, exactly.
That gets dangerous.
But honestly, it was a very, very sentimental and touching evening. But Andrew started out the dinner with a speech, and he said something about me that I was actually really proud of. But I guess, the three tools that I think I bring, according to my boss, Andrew Anagnos, for one more week, are the three H's, he called them: humor, humility, and hunger. And, if that's the legacy that I leave and those are the tools that I brought, then I'm pretty darn pleased with that.
I'd say you've done a good job if that's the case. And I agree with Andrew entirely on that sentiment. And as I mentioned before, quite grateful for, the work that you've done and even just supporting Digital Builder early on when I was still figuring out what the heck we're doing over here. I told you this previously, but I put on a good face the first couple of times we did episodes. I was really nervous.
Right.
It's like, all right, well, we're talking to the, senior vice president here, but your humor and graciousness, just the comfort that I felt talking to you after I got to know you, it goes a long way. So I'm going to have to agree with Andrew there. So
Thank you.
Amy, let's go back to our question here for you. What is one tool that you bring to every project you work on?
Well, I'm going to have to go off script again here. And I'll say that in working with Jim over all these years, I think your persistence and your unflappability have been really wonderful and helped me accomplish some really hard things. And I've seen you accomplish many really hard things with those attitudes. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of your amazing time here at Autodesk.
Thank you, Amy. And Amy and I are very close, and I know we'll remain close. She spends a great deal of time in Boston because she has a lot of family here. So I know I'll be seeing Amy,
And we text during the playoffs when our teams are winning or losing.
Exactly. So thank you, Amy. It has been an honor and a privilege serving by your side for the last 20 years,
plus, yeah.
plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible legacy that both of you have. And I'm just very grateful to be a small part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, everybody out there listening, you've probably figured out by now that you are listening to Digital Builder, and I am your host, Eric Thomas. If you have any questions for me, any guest suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can always find me over on LinkedIn. I am the only Eric Thomas, I believe, that works at Autodesk, so I should not be hard to find. Otherwise, if you are an audio listener, I always encourage you to head over to YouTube and check out our YouTube page. Of course, we are in the Autodesk Technology Center in Boston today, and everything behind me is very cool. I am surrounded by robots and 3D printers and all kinds of really cool stuff, so that is worth checking out. Otherwise, of course, you can find us on any podcast player you choose to listen to us. And until the next time, goodbye.